Welcome, Tom. Right on time. Thanks, man.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
Hey, Tom Johnson.
We're doing great.
Floyd, it's good to see you again. We miss you. So nice
I
to
miss
see
you
that
guys too.
familiar
Man,
face.
It's been like
No, you
5
don't.
weeks,
Are
I
you
think.
nuts?
Yeah. Wow.
He loves not working. Maybe he misses the people, but I don't think he missed the robots.
I'm trying to connect the dots about how you all know each other.
Ooh,
It looks like
that's a good question.
Yuri's in the East Coast, Matt, you're West Coast,
Yep.
Floyd, you're in Bellingham.
Start with Matt and Yuri.
So Yuri and I met on shemails.com.
Yes.
Just kidding. So
Those were the
I was
days.
trying to do that right when Floyd was taking a drink and didn't really have the effect I needed. No, so we're faculty brats from Champaign, Illinois, and we grew up.
We met in nursery school.
Yeah, like when we were 3.
Like
So,
3 years old, right?
Yeah, we've been
Yes.
arguing about stuff ever since then. And
The
at some
first
point
big
we said,
fight was which is better, Rolls Royce or Mercedes Benz. That was a huge fight. Went on for
right.
years.
Really?
It was bad. I mean, I don't know if we talked for 6 months. It was gnarly.
Yeah, it was
And
bad
we didn't
one.
really have skin in the game either, but
Well, no, your sister got a Mercedes Benz. That's why we argued.
yeah, but you didn't have a Rolls. I mean, it wasn't like we just
I
we were
wished.
pretty far away from being able to drive. Anyway, and then when through a series of adventures, I ended up in Boulder working for BEA, and I took a business trip there. I was living in San Francisco, and sometimes I would take trips. So my first business trip to Boulder, I got to go there, and I went into the office right on Pearl Street in the old Key Bank building, and I met the rest of the writers, and this is like, I don't know, June 2001, and there's one guy there, one goofy looking guy with a Mr. Bubble t-shirt on, and I'm like, okay, that's the guy, and we ended up being very goofy together. So yeah, we all go back. So Tom, welcome to the party.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
how about
good.
You all know
Tell
each
us
other,
your
right?
Backstory, Tom. When did you first encounter Floyd?
When I started working for Google, so probably 5 years ago.
Okay.
Actually, no, our teams merged, so may have been like 3 or 4. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's
Well,
funny because
Go
Tom,
ahead.
it's like, you know how there's the 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon? I think
Mm-hmm.
there's also one for Tom Johnson. So
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
we always tease Tom because he's got single best and most popular tech writing blog and presence out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I really
And
like
it's funny
it.
because, like, I think every one of us on our team, there were like, 10 or 11 of us on the tech writing team. And I think every single person on that team had an experience where they were at a conference or talking to another tech writer somewhere, and Tom Johnson comes up and they're like, you know Tom Johnson?
Yeah. No, it's like, who is that weird looking guy sitting next to the Pope or something? Like, those jokes. There's like so many different jokes. Well, yeah. So Tom, I'm really stoked that you showed up and that you're willing to look. Now, here's the first question we forget to ask this sometimes: is you've listened to some of the podcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we got data.
Oh, okay. Somebody actually showed up who listened.
Yes. So
That's
we
a
have-
big moment for us.
You're our third interview, and the first 2 interviews we asked them that question, and they're like, nope. And I'm like,
They're
we
like,
have
hell.
to find somebody who's actually heard it and didn't go, I have a really bad cold right now. So thanks for showing up, even though you did listen. Maybe you could ask me, maybe you could answer me a question. What is it about? What do you think it's about? Like, how would you describe this podcast without us breathing down your neck about it?
Well, I mean, it seems to be broadly about AI. 2 people who we don't really know much about their backgrounds seem to be trying to grapple with large questions and are somewhat skeptical about expert opinions and want to kind of look around the edges and other sort of areas to try to find answers. But it's not really quite clear what the questions are you're asking. I don't know what the angle is on AI.
Okay, that's good.
It would be nice to pinpoint that if possible. But I did like in the initial episode, I think it was Yuri talking about being in the moment before something bad goes down, like the 30s and so on, before everything goes south for the world, and trying to figure out exactly what's coming, what's happening. So maybe pinpointing in a specific question is beyond I don't know, practical sort of beyond something that you could do because you don't know the question. But anyway,
That's good. Thank you for that.
The other, let's see. I did kind of want more of an angle about like exactly what kind of talk about AI it is, but it's also you're deep thinkers. You're like curious people, and you're not afraid to have a 2-hour conversation. You don't seem to have any overt marketing purpose. You're not trying to push anything. You're just like in it for the love of the topic, the discussion, and yeah, you seem like radio or audio is a good format. Both conversational, deep. So here's
Tom,
the point.
before you came on,
Yeah.
You have more.
just wanted to say before you came on, Matthew said that he likes to rename everything that he does. So we've decided to change the name of this podcast to "We Love AI. We Want as Many Experts as Possible." So
I did see
that clarifies what we're doing.
Yeah, that's good. What were you going to say, Tom?
you did have a brief renaming that was an accident where you said "World Brain No Exit," and I thought that was pretty funny.
No,
But,
yeah.
But I do think it was a little odd to say no experts when your first two guests, Jobst and Chris, are like experts on something. And clearly, I mean, these guys have written books that are pretty thick, I guess. I haven't read the Performance Engineering and I haven't read Job's book, but they both seem like experts. So I was confused. I thought maybe I'm your token no expert person that you finally brought on. So
That's why they invited me, Tom.
they're like, man, we gotta get back to our original, purpose and title. We need to bring on the non-expert people.
Okay, I think this is your cue, Yuri, to fire it up.
So,
Yuri read the intro.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. But I do have a question, which I mean, because Tom, I love your premise, and I love that you're like, I want to know what you guys are about, and I think I would ask two questions related to that before we get started, which is number one, find me a person who's not been impacted by AI, and find me somebody who at some point in any conversation about AI doesn't say, I believe. Because there's so much, I think this will happen, this is my conviction, and therefore, who isn't touched by this? And yes, some people are touching it in different ways, but I think that has been our premise. And then, of course, Matthew and I just love to argue, so we have to find something to argue about.
And then what about the people who are affected by AI who have no idea they're being affected by AI?
Well, that's a very good category and worthy of like, who is that person? And it also has to do with the scale. But let me start with the intro. And so welcome to World Brain No Experts. 1938, the world neared total war, and H.G. Wells published World Brain, arguing that a global encyclopedia using a new technology called microfilm could bring about world peace. Taking H.G. Wells' essay collection as a departure point, two old friends, Matt and Yuri, and their guests offer a hyperbolic and inexpert conversation about the screaming arrival of AI. What has been awakened? Rough beast, benevolent angel, or boring super appliance? Are there any true experts? Could a few relatively smart outsiders be less wrong about AI, what it is, what changes it's going to make to our lives, than the glory-drunk founders, their whorish enablers, or the terrifying doomsayers? Finally, can an unstructured discussion between humans meaningfully enrich our understanding of the boundaries between us and what has been created? So I guess the first question is, glory-drunk founder, whorish enabler, or something else?
What I want to know is whether or not Tom is aware of the need for a dick joke at some point.
And that too. And Matthew tried to change it into a snake story, but
That's where it
I
started.
don't know.
Anyway,
I mean, it's
Tom, answer the question if you haven't thought about.
First of all, you already answered a question I asked before you started, which was, what are the big questions you're trying to answer? And now I see, is AI what did you say? The beast, the angel, the whore, one of those three or something?
Ooh, I like that
I'll take those three.
interpretation.
That's not bad either.
I want to party with that person.
Sorry.
That's a good Rochambeau
No.
setup.
Can you just repeat that for the three options from H.G. Wells? What did he say? Benevolent, beast, something, angel.
These don't come from
That's
Wells.
Matthew.
Oh, that's Matt. Okay.
That's Matthew. So, rough beast, benevolent angel or boring super appliance? My favorite.
Now, to be fair, Rough Beast is from Eliot. What rough beast his hour come at last slouches towards Bethlehem to be born, right? So that's a direct steal from a poet.
How did I take the word whore out of that? Did I just imagine that?
We described it
Whorish
whorish
enablers.
Yeah.
Whorish enablers. Okay. All right. I was like,
So,
man.
what you are in relation to it, has it sucked you into it's a proponent? I've read some of your documentation. I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah. Has AI sucked me in? For sure. For sure. I mean, it's changed everything about my job and the profession. And it's a fascinating topic. And I don't know where I stand on all of that. I mean, you mentioned that a lot of people have an I believe opinion. And I've just seen so many different facets of AI that I think any sort of position could be argued about detrimental effects, its positive effects, its absence of effects, which is why people are still talking about it after 3+ years of it becoming, all the rage. So, or however long it's been out, it's something that people can't quite figure out. And that's part of the intrigue. It's like, what is it? Some days it is the benevolent angel, and other days it's the rough beast. So it's kind of fascinating to have it all wrapped into one. So it's not an either or question. In other words, it's like, it's all of them.
Yeah. So Chris Fregley said that too. He said all of the above.
One of the questions that Matt and I start with, but I've heard this over and over again, and actually just read through a large panel discussion that the New York Times ran, in which they're just asking a whole wide range of quote experts, is to contextualize it, meaning compare this to the arrival of another technology. Which one would you choose?
What did people say? What was the closest comparison of AI technology?
One person repeated what I said. So for me, it's sort of like the arrival of the steam engine.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a technology that enables you to build other technologies, and I can see that. I mean, the steam engine gave rise to the whole industrial revolution and so on, right? It's that one enabling technology that allows so many others to build on top of it, for sure.
Or is it like, so last week we had a market event where the market dropped considerably, and it was attributed to an AI bubble bursting in part, or air coming out of an AI bubble. Is it like, remember when we were kids and we were sitting there in grade school and our teachers would say, watch out kids, the metric system, it's coming, get ready for it, Is AI like that, where it's just like, get ready, it's coming, and at some point it's like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. Much ado about nothing. I don't believe that personally, but the effect that it could have on people is just like this ballyhooed thing that eventually sneakily embeds itself into our lives in ways that we take for granted. I mean, it doesn't seem like a massive event like a tsunami that everybody's predicting.
It's interesting.
And there are economic reasons for doing that.
Last week, what I saw in the headlines was the SaaS apocalypse. So it looked to me like a lot of people, including the people who own the SaaS companies, the Oracles, the ServiceNows, and so on, were just flipping the next page in the PowerPoint slide of their strategy on, geez, I am sitting pretty now with software as a service, which is SaaS, but pretty soon I need to start placing my bets the past couple of years on AI plays that don't rely on a certain setup, right, that's being used, a certain business strategy that's already being used. And so what I thought I saw last week, and what I thought I read, was people were activating those bets and pulling money out of traditional plays, like products like just the Oracle, go to the web and build your application and hit our database online, and putting them into stuff where write code. Why would you ever write code? Go to the AI tool. And that's what I thought last week was. I don't know if anybody else has any different view on it, because there was some air let out of the AI tire, but it seemed to me, I don't know what you think, Tom or Yuri.
I think this idea that people are going to just use AI to write their own versions of the software they need was a little bit naive. Like, sure, you can vibe code small apps and so on, but like, are you really going to recreate entire platforms and complex, sophisticated software products? I mean, you're not going to vibe code Photoshop, for example. I mean, maybe somebody has and I just don't know about it, but I mean, I tried to vibe code something and I realized it's extremely difficult and it's like not a very usable output.
Super error prone. Super error prone.
We had a wild conversation the other day with Chris Fregley, and he's written this 1,000-page book for O'Reilly. It's his third book.
Wow.
And among the many weird things about that interview, first of all, it's great because he's a really sweet guy. I remember liking him back in Boulder at BEA. Floyd and I both knew him, and he was just a super affable, nice guy. I related to him a lot because he's from a Catholic background from Chicago, college kid, football player. I mean, all these things that I sort of am in a way. Not anymore. Not playing football at the age of 61. But one of the things he said, Tom, was his resolution for 2026 is to never write any code himself. And he coaches teams a lot. He gets brought into software companies who are the leaders of the teams are going, wait, how do we navigate this? Should we let anybody, for instance, use AI tools in their interviews? Or should we let anybody use AI tools while they're coding? And I brought the question to him, hey, we talked, when Jobst talked to us, he casually mentioned that one company he was working with was using Claude to generate a bunch of code. And he said their code maintenance costs had shot up because everyone knows that code maintenance is more expensive than just writing the first piece of code. And Chris's take was really eye-opening to me. He was like, why would you write the code and with an AI thing and then have humans maintain it? That makes no sense. He's like, you should go in totus porcus, whole hog, all the way in or nothing.
So Tom, this actually hits on, I think, one of I read through your list of 10 topics or the 10 ways to approach AI. And I think this is one of the ones that I found really useful in articulating how it's changed my workflows is you kind of have to use it in everything that you do. And it's constantly changing. So where I get most frustrated, endless conversations I've had with this podcast, but also literally everyone I work with as well, where people are trying to put their finger on something that's changing so fast that any kind of I think it will do this, or I think that, I tried this and it didn't work, becomes meaningless almost at the moment you've said it. One example is, 3 days ago or however many days ago, OpenAI releases Codex, right? So Codex it's certainly the most obvious and transparent system right now available that's trying to deal with this problem, right? So yes, people are trying to vibe code big and small things, and I've read a lot of accounts of some really very, very ambitious ways that people are trying to use it. And meanwhile, OpenAI and all the major platforms are furiously trying to deal with the memory issues, the scaling issues, because they know that the trillions that they're putting into this will live or die based on whether or not that eventually works. But also, this thing is changing all the time. So to set this as a frame, you've got on the one side people, idiots like me, saying, yes, this is the biggest thing that caused the Industrial Revolution. On the other side, Matthew, at least at some points, has argued it's all hype. It's all marketing language. It's all part of this closed loop of investment that has generated, if one person quoted 20% of all the dollars ever printed have been printed in the last 2 years to finance this particular bubble. So, I'd be interested to see where you land on some of those.
Well, definitely,
spectrums.
I like this point about having to try everything. And that's a point that is in Ethan Mollick's book, Co-Intelligence. The idea that AI is really good at things you might guess it's couldn't do, but it might fail and flop at things you thought would be an easy task. And so you can only really get a feel for what it can do by experimenting. But this is a conundrum because I routinely run up against people who say things like, well, I just can't get AI to generate usable documentation output. It just doesn't, it never really works for me. And I'm like, well, why does it not work for you, but it works for me? What am I doing differently than you? And so this idea that somebody's experience informs their beliefs about capabilities is chopped down a bit because, well, it's like you tried it and you came to a certain conclusion, but maybe you didn't do it the right way, or maybe you did a different way than another person. So it's hard to really, I don't know. You can only get so much mileage out of that idea about how you just need to try it and see if it works, because it's like you need to also figure out different ways of trying it. The same thing.
Yeah. To brag a little bit on Tom, he's one of the few people that I've worked with who, I mean, I've worked with so many awesome people. Tom stands out in that he's one of the most curious people, just people in general that I've ever met. And he will try everything. He's really creative in how he thinks about problems and approaches. And I think what Tom is describing when he says I run into people who basically hit the wall and stop, right? And I think this also points to the whole nature of the question around will AI ever replace technical writing? And the way Tom is looking at it is from a place of curiosity and sort of co-human, co-AI. Let's experiment with this. Let's try this out, as opposed to somebody else who will hit a wall and just say, "This sucks. I'm not going to use it," and falls back to, "Oh, there's enough question marks out there about AI that I'm just going to sit back on my laurels and wait for it to implode, or wait for somebody else to come up with a solution." Whereas Tom will be the one like pushing really hard to try to figure out not only what it's capable of and not capable of, but where the balance is between the human and the machine.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think what occurs to me is that, so I've been nominally a tech writer on and off from mostly on for decades. And pretty much, I guess I want to say, like, you've seen one tech writer job, you've seen one tech writer job. It's I think one of the things that is being obsolesced, is truly being obsolesced by AI, by the emergence of LLMs in particular, is the definition of a tech writer as a role that can be so flexible and can be so thrown around. Like, based on the different roles I've done, some were extremely developer focused, some were extremely project management focused, some were basically business analysis jobs.
Yep.
Some have been taxonomy and ontology jobs that had almost no writing in it at all. So one of the things I think is that's dead on the field right now is the definition of tech writer as this really open thing. It's almost as open as I'm a software developer. Oh, does that mean you tinker with JavaScript? Like, you tinker with like templates? Or does it mean you like are using the Gang of Four patterns to architect a whole new way to process a really complex data object? So, I mean, that's one thing I just want to observe.
Sorry, Matt, before we go too far into this, because I'm really interested in this, but I want to make sure that there are a lot of people that actually don't even know what a tech writer is. So can we just give a basic working definition?
Yeah, we better each, well, you got three. I called this talk in my notes, 3 tech writers and a photographer walk into a bar. So, yeah, so let's have Floyd, Tom, and then me. How's that? Floyd, you want to go? What is a tech writer?
Yeah, and I think this is something that, like if you talk to tech writers, I think most of them will have the same desires and drive that pulls them into the profession, because I think most times it's an accidental profession that people step into or back into. Some people study it specifically, but ultimately it's a desire to help other people understand really complicated things. Like be able to put into an understandable form, whether it's a video or a drawing or language or whatever, something that will get them from A to B in their brain and get them to understand a new thing that previously was really, really difficult to understand.
And I think that I love that definition. That's perfect. You know, how do you get people to understand something really complicated? And that is precisely why AI is so relevant to the tech writing profession, because we're always working on the edge of things we don't understand that are just complicated, even for the engineers that might be our audience. And so I rely on AI a lot to try to unpack and understand things. It's more relevant to tech writing for sure than many other jobs.
That's great. Well, and so for me, what is tech writing? I think tech writing, I've always thought of tech writing as a way to thread the needle between the business folks who understand what we're actually trying to accomplish because what we're doing is like knowledge transfer for the sake of wealth capture. That's the way I've defined it in a really dense way. And what that means to me is the product people or the business, the executive function of the business says we're putting something out because we want to get paid for it. And we want to put it out at a lower cost than we get paid for it, right? That's wealth capture. And so I'm threading the needle between that interest and the technical side, which is usually in the software world, people who know a great deal more than I do, because most people do, all people do, but who know a great deal about the technical stuff, but they are often have drifted away from the business case stuff, what they're trying to do for the customer or whatever. So I got really good at threading the needle between what the business actually wants to happen at the moment of contact with the customer, and what the technologist brings to the party. And that's enabled me to continue listening way past the point where I haven't understood anything for a couple of days or whatever. I joined one company. It was the most highfalutin gig I ever had. It was a startup based in Basel, Switzerland. Yuri and I worked there together at some point for a while. But the first month of that work, I would spend 12 hours in a conference room with a bunch of architects and health, HL7 experts and a bunch of physicians and pharmaceutical students or people who are experts in pharmaceutical research. And there were plenty of times when I would think to myself, I don't understand what that person just said so profoundly. I don't understand which the verbs were and what the adjectives. Can't tell the objects from the subjects. And that's a place, for whatever reason, is a place of comfort for me. Like, I love that. So I think a tech writer is about making connections between purposeful transfer of knowledge and understanding for the sake of a real business goal.
Yeah, that's really good. The practical aspect of it also plays out in the fact that people make the decision to become technical writers because it's going to pay them more than the newspaper that they're writing for, or it pays more than being an English teacher or whatever. But ultimately, people find when they get into technical writing that it comes down to storytelling. It's storytelling just like everything else.
I just want to throw a twist on this. So those definitions of tech writing, 100% agree, and it has really covered the field for decades. That kind of high level, what are the business goals? How do we help this person understand and connect the two? But now tech writing, let me throw out a kind of an argument. Tech writing is shifting away from the user. You're writing for the machine. You're writing for the agent, because now people aren't reading tech docs with the patience they used to. They're going to Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, and they're just expecting these tools to understand and have that knowledge. They're connecting an MCP server that will have all the documentation and the tools. So really, you're writing to make that AI tool much smarter so that when people integrate it, it's got all the information they need. And that shift is pretty profound, because both of you centered your definition of a tech writer on like trying to understand human. Just Floyd said storytelling, and you mentioned the business goals that people actually have on that high level strategy and connecting. You take the user out of the equation, and now you've got yourself in a loop where you're trying to improve the LLM's accuracy on a list of different questions, and you just keep iterating to try to improve that accuracy, and you're not really thinking as much about the human and their frustrations or frictions.
Well, I like that, but I would also say that just push back on that for a second, because if you model interactions, or if you model like information planning, right? You go as administrator, I want to know how to add a new user with such and such a right to the system, right? And so, but as an end user, I want to be able to accomplish the changing of some value in the database as quickly as possible, right? And so now what we've added, because there still are some cases where the person writing the doc is writing to a human, but I agree, especially with reference doc for APIs for software, for application programming interfaces, the programmer is not. It's not that the programmer is not involved. It's that the programmer is probably using an AI tool to find your documentation that you've written or composed, and they are still sometimes making decisions, maybe 100 at a time, but they're still the ultimate consumer of something. So in the between part, it's not just we wrote it, we put it into some format so they could find it with a user interface. It's we wrote it or we composed it using a bunch of tools. We put it into a place where they could find it, but they're not finding it with our front end. They're finding it with some other tool, which is maybe an LLM is going to go crunch it up and spit it out to them in some other format, right? So the user is still involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's just two layers back. Let me just add one little note.
Sure.
So you have you have this idea of, oh, maybe I've got a developer who's got like anti-gravity open and they're like asking the side pane, how do I do this? And then it spits out code. And you also got the idea of somebody's like got an agent that they've tasked to build an app, and the agent is now interfacing with the other LLM to get the instruction and iterating back and forth. And the user's like in another world entirely kind of while all this happens.
So I wanted to frame this in a slightly different way. So first of all, tech and writer, I love writers. I actually admire in the creative world, for me, writers are in some ways at the top, even though I'm not one of them. It's just something that I admire so much. And having actually interacted with all three of your writings in different ways, that was the first thing I noticed. Like some of the topics that they may work on for a living may be dry, but they're all writers. And each one of you just talked about the audience. Right. So, of course, my thought went directly to what Tom wrote in it for us in advance, which is there's a new audience coming. And right now it's a co-audience. I think what some are worrying about is because you talked about a couple of different things, Tom, that I thought were extremely useful. Share a voice is the one that touches me the most because I'm a digital marketing person and I'm having to reconfigure a lot of what I do because now I have to worry about how that machine reads the voice that I create. But yeah, the other part of this is how we absorb the fact that soon possibly the information gets so vast and it's so useful to have the machines reading that information, humans may no longer actually have time to do this at all. And one of the things I think you said was something like zero flaw documents or zero error documents, sort of trying to use it as an accelerator to get to the point where you can get to a much greater a level of purity than ever before. The worry there, of course, is that eventually you just start letting go, even though you're not realizing it. You're no longer using that human judgment that's so necessary. You just can't.
You mentioned like the time factor and just like not having time to do it all. I think this is one of those side effects of using AI that is more troubling. I've noticed that I've lost a lot of patience just writing something out, sitting down and writing out a 1,500 word blog post. It takes at least an hour. And that's a lot of time when you're used to watching these AI tools just crank out information in a matter of seconds, or just reading something, right? It's like, oh, this is a 4,000 word essay. It's going to take me an hour to read this. Maybe it's thick, but I can also just have AI summarize it in a few, seconds, and I get the high level takeaways. And so, as you say, you're like, we become, I don't know, we seem to not have the time or the patience anymore for long or manual writing, long form content consumption. And we become more and more dependent on the AI to do it for us. It's a little troubling. I don't really know.
Well, so I want to reply to that because this is very interesting to me. What Yuri and I have both noticed, I think, when we talked to Chris Fregley, who is working at a pace that I don't know anybody who works at this pace. He seems to work 7 days a week. He seems to work from can't see to can't see.
997.
7.
But I noticed that when we asked him a question, I asked him, he basically said, this big book, this 1,000-page book that he wrote about AI systems performance engineering, he said it's really 3 books. And I said, how did you describe the 3 chunks of the book? Because I looked through the outline. I couldn't really tell confidently what it was. He started talking about, well, the 2 books I wrote before for O'Reilly were this one and this one. I never got him to the point where I could tell whether he was talking about the book we asked him about. There are 3 books in there, or I wrote 3 books. I think they're both true, but what happened was he was multi-threading like crazy. And the whole notion of threading was based on an understanding of the human brain that has since been discredited, or at least had a warning label put on it saying, you probably shouldn't shard your brain the way you would a really powerful chip. So you mentioned that lack of patience, Tom, that you have when you think, oh, do I really have to read this whole thing, or do I have to really write this whole thing? And so the reason I'm mentioning that is because I have been doing a practice for several years now of handwriting 3 pages and copying down half a page of text with the deliberate purpose of slowing my mind down, not only because I make better decisions when I need to make a decision about priority or about relationships or communication, I need to make it slowly. I need to think about it for a minute. If I make it quickly, I'll probably make the wrong move. Now, of course, there's lots of things in work or when you're driving and someone from Washington is on the road and you have to watch yourself because they're going to try to kill you. I mean, seriously.
Can't
Oh
confirm.
my God. So you have to use your fast brain, right? But sometimes you need to use your slow brain. So there are exercises you can do in the real world, and this is an old tradition. But I've been trying to get a set of conversations going. We've got people who are rushing into the tidal wave of AI, right? The tsunami of AI. Yourself, Chris Fragility, everyone on this call, in a way, we're all kind of in there. But there are also people who are moving toward, they're trying to look for high ground. They're looking for the high and dry, I call it. They're looking for places in the analog world, in the real world, so to speak, where you can build a physical practice. We can learn how to breathe better. You can do some singing. You can build community with people, whatever it is. Learn how to do some crafty thing with your hands. Think with your hands, not with your brain. And I hope that this podcast becomes something where we thread the needle between people who are really swimming in the AI stuff and people who are going, you know what, we saved a place for you in the real world because this planet's still going to be here when all the AI stuff takes away all our jobs and we're just sitting there going, now what do? I can't tap my computer anymore.
So Matthew hopes, but I keep saying to him, there is no spoon, and he just refuses to listen.
Well, what do you say? There is no dry land, right? But what do you think, Tom, about what I just said?
Well, I did see, I was looking at your Substack profile or LinkedIn, and I saw that you have a practice of solitude, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't see that coming. But I can see how it makes sense as almost a pushback to the accelerated pace of tech. I actually have a book on the slow movement and was fascinated by this, reading about how somebody went to a restaurant in Italy and spent 4 hours at dinner and had the most best night of his life just by taking time to eat slowly, and I'm like, man, I want this. There's even one other dimension of the fragmentation that is worse than the ones I mentioned. I find that I have to open up two different IDEs, like two editors, because I'll put one task in one editor and it takes a while for the AI to kind of crunch through it. And I might have to jump back and hit allow and so on. And I'm impatient enough that I'll open up a second window and start a second task, and I'll flip between the two tasks, context switching immediately, like in every minute or two. Mm-hmm. And that really ping pongs my brain.
I'm recording 4 podcasts right now. I'm talking to people about backyard chickens and home cooking and survivalism, all kinds of things. I'm just switching back and forth so fast you can't even see.
A lot of people have said, why are we doing this? Why are we going faster? I mean, the effect of all this AI tools is now a new tool opens up every day and a new business and a new this. And people are kind of fed up about the breathless pace of it all. It's like, can we just slow down?
This is something that Chris said that I really resonated with. Chris is just talking about jump in with, you got to go all out. And Tom, you said this too, do it in everything in every way. But at the end of our call, Chris, in this very sort of beautiful moment, said, you know what? I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. And it's not just because I work hard, because this guy is a workhorse that never stops. But there is something different about this accelerated, and if you want to call it co-intelligence experience, that our brains are not calibrated to. But Tom, I had a specific question for you, because I love that you wrote a set of questions and ideas specifically for students. I'm fascinated. I work in a university, so I'm fascinated by the very soon to arrive generation alpha, for whom this is completely native, and who may have a very, very different perspective on this.
Yeah, I've been trying to wrap my head around what to say to students and faculty, because they're in a completely different sort of world where, I mean, in the corporate world, AI has sort of become the norm. It's like this huge productivity thing that everybody's behind. I think in the academic world, it's a lot more controversial. People push back more. Yeah. There's a lot of concerns people have. They're not being mandated to do it. It's sort of at odds with the whole purpose of academia, which is to help people learn and sort of develop critical thinking skills. Do you only get so my question is how can you salvage this accelerated mode in a positive way to keep learning? Can you go in slow mode while using AI? Maybe you could use it to slow down. I don't know. Take and analyze some little mundane detail and open up a world around it. Honestly, I don't really know, but yeah, it is fascinating. What do you think about students? What do you think this rising generation, the next workforce, are they messed up, or are they going to be like empowered in ways we weren't?
Well, I work with a lot of I'm not in the classroom, but I hire students and I teach them to code. And I teach them to be front end developers specifically. And some of them are actually computer science majors who are going to go way beyond that, but some of them are economists and psychologists and other things. And we have one conversation, which I always think of it as like the bathroom running water issue, which is, a lot of people around me will sort of very adamant about this idea, which is student comes and says, I'm going to go like wash my hands and use the bathroom. And the person says, but there's an outhouse outside and it's such a beautiful experience and it's much better for you to like go out into the fresh air. So why don't you go use that? And the student's like, what are you talking about? Like they're so thoroughly unimpressed with technologies that have existed since they've been conscious that they don't have this sort of gee whiz, wow, this is amazing, or this is horrible or terrifying. This is just their reality. And so I think their brains are changing. I think, yes, they are massively impacted. The ones I worry about the most are ones who they don't have their own convictions. And they actually feel, and they're saying to this, and my son is 19, is saying this to me, which is, it's robbing me of my ability to have belief and conviction because I've got this so confident, authoritative voice sitting at my shoulder at all times. Yeah. And there's nothing I can't ask it. And I don't really know what's right or wrong. I'm not like you who has well-formed ideas about things. So that's one of my biggest worries, is this idea that actual judgment is being destroyed. Okay, well, and then we know who owns these systems and we don't trust them.
So here's the thing. I will say this, that Tom, you mentioned active solitude, and that is a course I taught live for a year online on Saturdays for a while, and for a whole year, and I loved teaching. It was so much fun. And it was from a practice I had developed for several years before that, and the idea was analog first. It was get up in the morning and don't turn on your device. Don't go to find out what is happening in the electronic world, in the electronic signals. Go to a piece of paper, write down what you think, dump your brain out for 3 pages, and then take a book, maybe an old growth book, what I would call an old growth book, which is something that has been burnished by the hands of time, right? I wound up copying chunks of the Republic. I ended up copying.
You did the sutras, right?
I wound up with the sutras, which I loved because I found a translation that I really liked, and so every day I would copy 3 or 4 of those out. They're very manageable, and I took time to really enjoy it. And your point about like writing something longhand or actually writing something without assistance seems agonizing in a way, but what I discovered from that, and I also did some breath work in there too when I taught the class, and I'm working on a book on that too. So on active solitude, it's going to become a book. But what I noticed was that making it enjoyable to have time with yourself is something that does not come naturally to anybody, and probably hasn't forever. Like, there's always been people rushing through the streets making noise, or threats, or chores, or people nagging at you, or kids being brats, or dogs barking, whatever. There's always been things contending for our attention and disrupting our peace. And I grew up in a large family, and so to me, like, the idea of spending time by myself first before I go out into the world, deciding what's important to me, just for 45 minutes, half an hour, whatever, and then going and finding out what I can do, what I can contribute, how I can relate to people, is the answer to how do you deal with the digital world. Because now when I work in the digital world, I feel confident and I feel fluid, and I'm pretty fast, actually. I solve a lot of work problems. I end up solving a lot of work problems on paper first, and then I go, oh, I understand now what really matters. Now I can use the digital tools to do something. So that's my little solution. But I don't know if everyone else, a lot of people who maybe grew up as singletons or only children or whatever, are like, I don't want to spend solitude. That sounds not appealing at all. No one has ever gone to me and said, I mean, I felt like in a lot of ways when I was posting about that all the time, like Will Farrell in that movie, we're going streaking, and you've been streaking for like through the city, halfway through the city, naked, and no one is behind you. That's the way I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom, I wanted to ask you something. This is, I think a lot of the pressures, my theory is that a lot of the pressures that we feel around AI and what we do with AI are commercial, not personal. Because capitalism is the machine that always has to be fed. Like you always have to feed the beast. And Tom, you work at Google, whose mission is very much in line with sort of the idea behind this podcast, which is Google's mission is to organize all the world's information and make it universally accessible. Like Google is trying to make the world brain accessible, right? And there's a lot of pressure, a lot of commercial pressure throughout Google, throughout, the industry as a whole to produce and create and make the next best thing. So Tom, my question for you is, what pressures do you feel, whether they're self-imposed, whether they're handed down from your organization or company, what pressures are you feeling around AI? And
I've talked to quite a few people in different settings that are at different companies, and it feels like the sentiment around AI is pretty common. They're all like similarly moving full throttle forward with AI and have pressures that don't seem totally unique to like Google or where I'm at. But you're bringing up this tension between this desire that we have to cultivate our own sense of judgment and to kind of have the slow mode where we recharge versus this corporate world where it's like, hey, here's a new tool. It's going to make things easier. You're going to be able to do more. And by the way, this other team has this new API. We need it documented. You got to move fast. And definitely there's this pressure that comes from the whole layoff trends where it's like you never quite know how long your job's going to last. It's like you hear about Amazon laying off thousands of people and you're like, why did they do that? That's crazy. And that more than anything gives a sense of like, well, maybe I just need to move faster. I need to show that I'm on board. I need to show that I'm like I'm hitting home runs, and I got to move with these new tools and show that I'm doing miracles. There's probably a lot coming from all those layoffs that are happening. But I think, yeah, for me, I almost feel like if I spend too much time in slow mode, then I'm not going to be able to live up to those pressures, I guess. I don't know. I mean, there's this tension between the slow movement and kind of moving fast. I went through a phase like 2-3 years ago where I tried to give up my smartphone. I was really into like, I can't even remember why, but I was like learning maps in my area, paper maps, memorizing directions. I was really trying to wean myself off GPS, all this stuff. Found myself reading a bunch more. I'm like, oh, I have suddenly an appetite for reading and classical music. This is crazy. But then I think eventually I returned to my phone. Can't replace texting with anything else. It was like my wife was really not into this. And I had this fear that I was like missing out. Like if you're not on the train that's moving at 90 miles an hour, you're going to be left behind. You're not going to have the skills. You're not going to know how to use AI. Nobody's going to hire you. You're going to be like out on the curb. So is this tension?
So Tom, we've this really enjoying the fact that our very first guest podcast included somebody who really a lot of his questions have borne fruit in so many different ways, especially if you choose to just disagree with all of them. And one of the premises that he mentions, and really Google was central in this, is Google is really the only company that is well positioned to actually make any money with this, because the only way that's really been demonstrated to make a lot of money with AI systems is through advertising. So I was just wondering, since you're in the Google ecosystem, I'm an avid user of the Google ecosystem, but I'm fairly agnostic. I use OpenAI probably as much as Google. Where you think that since you're in the system to some extent, where the merit lies in that question?
Honestly, I have very little opinion on that. I'm not in ads. I'm not in AI orgs. I work on like APIs in cars kind of thing. So there's tremendous push to try to make cars more autonomous, give them more high level detail, provide AI voices and capabilities within them. But as far as the whole ad integration, yeah, that I'm not the person to really give opinion on that. And I don't even think I'm allowed to. So either way.
I knew you were going to say that, but let's jump to cars then, because I think at least somebody on this call has said that the idea of self-driving cars is pornographic. So just curious.
Who was that, Yuri? Who would have said something like that? Oh, God.
Or obscene, at
Well,
least.
I use the word pornographic, so I'll just fill in so that we can ask this question to Tom. So, and again, this may be something you can't really talk about, but I was saying that instead of devoting all this energy and investment in technology and innovation into making a single passenger vehicle that possibly could be burning fossil fuels, making that an able way for someone to get back and forth by themselves without thinking about it, so they can maybe watch Netflix while their car is driving itself to work, wouldn't it be better to take all that energy and put it on behalf of, invest it on behalf of like mass transit, making mass transit something that really is viable. Now I know that all our cities in America have been built up with the car. In fact, I'm reading 1929, a book about the great market crash, which I don't know why I'm reading that. Someone just gave it to me, but it's really ringing a lot of bells. And one of the things I think is fascinating about it is that the 5-day work week was actually born during the market crash. And the specific reason was because if we give people, not just because people were already starting in the workforce in America at the time, to start working like half days on Saturdays. They'd already had Sunday off regularly. But the thinking was, and this was on behalf of spoken by one of the people who was an investment banker leader in policy, who had a lot of sway with the government and so on. He said, if we give them all Saturday off, then they will take off in their cars on Friday. They'll spend money on gas. They'll buy new cars. They'll stay in hotels. They'll eat in restaurants. It'll stimulate the economy. I'd never heard that specifically linked to that time period. So when Floyd says this panic about missing out on, oh my God, you got to keep cranking, or people are going to lay you off and whatever, a lot of that fear being commercial, I tend to agree with a lot of that. I don't think that individuals in the world, like Yuri keeps yelling at me because I keep saying AI is creating something like that nobody ever asked for, and having to keep up in a high pressure corporate job. I've been in that situation, and it's kind of intense.
I think there's a larger argument that people are frustrated about with AI. In like, you saw this especially with OpenAI recently. There was a YouTuber who was saying OpenAI and these other AI companies had promised to like cure cancer, bring in massive scientific discoveries, really do stuff that's like elevating humanity. And instead we get this gimmicky Sora app, or we get like features that nobody wants. And you're mentioning driverless cars. Like, do we need them? Do we want them? What problems is it actually solving? Why spend so much time, energy, and investment in solutions that aren't like elevating humanity? And that's something that I think a lot of people are frustrated about across the tech industry. So much of all the coding skills, all the talent all the energy of my life is being poured into some feature that's meaningless. And I have discussions about this with one of my brother-in-law, who's he's definitely like a socialist. He's like, anarchy is the only thing that actually makes sense for government. He's very left-wing. He lives in Portland. Love the guy.
Oh my God, what a
Philosopher. He's very, very devoted. And it always comes back to this capitalism idea. And it's like, well, this is capitalism. And I haven't figured out a solution for this. He's going to quit his tech job and become a school bus driver. Maybe that's his fantasy. And I'm like, really? But how have you answered this question? Like, should all these tech companies trying to cure cancer? I mean, the whole system we've got is built around profit and shareholder value. If you have stocks, you certainly don't want your investments to tank. You want the investments to go up. So these companies are hostage to the system too. It's not like, if you have a CEO lead who suddenly decides to pour money into nonprofit endeavors and the stock gets cut in half, they'll just replace him with somebody else because people want to have a return on their investment. So it's like,
Well,
Well, Tom,
go ahead.
Can we stick
Tom
with?
Johnson, flight risk.
Can we?
But listen, go ahead.
But hang on, Matt, for 1 second. I just want to stick with the cars just for a second because you were talking about problem to be solved. So let's just start with that. It's because it's a very small question. 30,000 motor vehicle deaths in the U.S. each year. So yes, some debate. Some say yes, some say no. But that is an actual problem. I don't think we can roll back America's addiction to their individual cars that has been created over the last 100 years. But what if you could actually make a vehicle experience that would not kill nearly as many as it does now?
I think that we can roll it because peak oil is going to take care of that, right? And when it does, electric cars are going to look awful smart. Unfortunately, we don't have electric buses. A lot of other countries have got this problem licked. Now we have a lot of spread out geography and cities across vast areas that change the economics of it. Nobody on this call is going to solve the problem of whether we should go with individual cars or whether we should go with mass transit. I'm just pointing out that this is one example of if you really look at it, I'm the person who has to come in and point out something really obvious and go, well, that's insane. And that's just one example. And I don't feel convinced that that's not insane. I know there's context and history and momentum, but I don't know.
Well, see, I equate that, and I know Matthew, you and I could argue this, but I equate that particular number, the 30,000, with another one, which is 40,000, which is something else that's truly insane about the United States, which is our addiction to guns, right? So we're addicted to cars, and cars are nominally more utilitarian than a gun, but we're addicted to both, and they both result in, over the course of 20 years, for example, hundreds of thousands of deaths.
Just to put in a little plug for the bright side of tech and its impact on this.
There we go.
I mean, because I work in the Maps group and the group that's helping with Google Maps in cars, it is sort of sure, you lose the sort of native orientation from not having GPS, but the ability to drive anywhere and have directions that will take you there has been liberating. I even see my daughter on a college campus using Google Maps to figure out where her classes are. I mean, Google Maps is like this shining app that has been so positive in terms of its impact. I mean, you get lost and it reroutes you. It's giving you different options. So, it can be liberating in a way.
I use it all the time. And also on the bright side, so next week we're talking to 2 pharma researchers, specifically neuropharma. And we're going to be talking to them about their use of AI when they search for, I think, mostly genetic treatments for really rare diseases. These are diseases that, at our current pace, the pace of 10, 20 years ago, the way pharma did research and labs and clinical trials, was impossible to even consider a disease that affects 3 out of 100,000 people. But now that stuff is within their reach for a bunch of different reasons. So we are looking at people who are really in the weeds of using AI for a lot of purposes. And eventually I want to talk to people who know about AI in weapon systems and warfighting and things like that. But for now, we're talking about, I want to go in and explore people who are really swimming into the wave, right? So that's what I'm excited to talk to you. And by the way, Tom, do we have you for another half hour, 15 minutes? How much time can you continue talking?
As much as you want. Yeah, I don't really have a hard limit.
Let's go another half an hour if that's okay. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So,
Yuri, you have more questions?
Well, so I wanted to go back to something that Floyd said because I think it's really important and part of this whole discussion, which is the role, if you call it this, the role of capitalism. And the idea that, and we talked about the Industrial Revolution, I would actually, if we want to get really grandiose or really big, I would back it up even further. Because wealth creation in the U.S. starts on a backbone of slavery and, the bond market and how, this country became the juggernaut that it is. It was built on this incredible tension between some idea of freedom, justice, and equality on one side, but the exploitation of human labor and genocide and all this stuff on the other side. And so a lot of folks are arguing, and especially those doomsdayers are arguing, that we are now hitting this incredibly pivotal moment in human history where arguably a very beneficial engine of human innovation, which is capitalism, may have come up against its nemesis, because the whole system is tuned to grow and evolve, and you just follow it where it evolves and it generates more wealth. But what if you get to a moment where, as a lot of people are saying, you, Tom, for example, or you, Floyd, you jump into this new innovative moment and you innovate yourself out of a job, and you innovate whole entire sectors of employment out of existence. They don't go away completely, right? But you start to actually hit that moment where you're destabilizing the entire structure by innovating.
And is there something to replace it? Is there something to replace it?
Well, so
Can
that's
those people
why I
pick
talk
up
about
a
high
new
ground.
skill? What new skill is there for people to pick up?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and that's part of why I want to talk to people who are doing things in the real world, because those things, people presumably, no matter how much roboticism or no matter how much what do you call it, transhumanism we engage in, we're probably going to still need to eat, engage in peristalsis and its wonderful results, and we're probably going to continue to age, no matter how many injections people take or face replacements they have. People are going to, no matter how many organs they swap out, people are going to age and die. And those activities that support those, like home health care, for instance, or basic blocking and tackling of plumbing, building things, a lot of those things could theoretically in a lab be replicated by robots, but practically they can't.
But let me just add to that, and Tom, I want to let you answer too, which is that the infrastructure of civilization is now so tightly interwound, it's too fragile. Meaning all this beautiful stuff you're talking about, like baking bread, living in the woods, disconnecting from technology, just completely collapses because you're going to go to the store and there's no food. What do you do then?
So let me see if I understand kind of what you're saying, Yuri. You're saying like this capitalist system has the engine of demanding continued growth, grow. And in order to keep growing, people have to come up with ways to automate the work that allows like growth to happen at another scale. But at some point, like the whole system buckles because now you've just unemployed half the workforce, and you've got social upheaval and whatever else happens, riots, and the whole system kind of crumbles. Is that like the fear?
That scenario that people are talking about for sure, yes.
Yeah. Do you think that's the path is that the only story of continued growth? I mean, is there another ending to that?
Let me just follow that to its conclusion, and I've forgotten this guy's name. He's an Eastern European guy that has gotten a lot of attention over this idea, which is, if I hand you a glass of water and I say, if you drink this water, I'll give you $1 million. But there's only one problem with that. There's a 1% chance that if you drink it, you're going to die. Will you drink the water? And let's up the ante, which is, I'll give you $100 million, but there's a 1% chance that if you drink this cup of water, everybody in the world is going to die. So what do you do?
Have you been reading oh man, I forgot the name. If Everyone Builds It, Everyone Dies book?
That's the guy. That's the
Nate
guy I'm
Suarez
talking about.
and Yudowski. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, those are great ethical sort of like scenarios to contemplate. And where do you stand on that? Do you do you drink the water?
So I'm an optimist.
We're obviously all chugging the water.
I mean,
we're chugging it.
I have so much pleasure and enjoyment and I've been saying this a lot, which is I've been talking to humans my whole life. The fact that I'm talking to something non-human, even though I don't know if it's alive and conscious and all of that, I find it endlessly fascinating. It's also helping me do just tremendous amounts of things, and including a lot of things that I've never done before. I think you mentioned at one point, command line work. I had never done that before. And now I'm a Mac user. I'm like in love with my terminal because I now have this tireless companion that shows me how to work in the terminal. I'm just loving it. So I'm enjoying every step of the way towards doom and destruction. That's
Back to
where
the
I am.
terminal.
I read that book, that if everyone builds it, and I think a lot of people criticize the authors for not really having much evidence and data to support their arguments, but also that they had just conceived of a sort of catastrophic end and not sort of gradations of the end. Their idea was that, like, yeah, the world ends in this annihilation of humanity, and yet there's so many different flavors or different gradations of how the bad things could happen. You could have, like, partial misalignment. You could even have benevolent ending where, like, oh my God, the AI, it, whatever, in its super intelligence decides to choose good over human.
And it builds the
Yeah.
spaceship that we all go up into, like in the movie Wall-E,
Yeah.
and we just recline for the rest of our days and get
Blue,
fat.
it's the new red. Yeah.
And there's some more mundane good scenarios, such as actually universal guaranteed income actually works, and human beings are freed up from a lot of drudgery. And I would say a good chunk of all jobs are drudgery currently. And so you end up with this sort of a much more utopian human existence in which you've automated a lot of things that grind us down.
If the world no longer wants power in any quadrant, if that gets allowed, if that type of solution is allowed by people in power. Sorry, that was dark.
I admit that I'm definitely curious to see how this all plays out. And I think a lot of people, we'd like to roll the dice. The world has so many problems. And is there a possible solution with AI? Who knows? But definitely curious to see whether it can have beneficial effects and help people. Probably it will be this mixed bag, coming back to the original question. Is it a beast? Is it whatever man, that's not sticking in my head. Is it a beast? Is it a benevolent angel? It's going to have like both of those at the same time playing out.
So in our first guest podcast, the person that we interviewed the title of his book is Machines Will Never Rule the World, AI Without Fear. And so we really dug a lot into that second clause, which is AI without fear, in which he then retracted and said that he's writing a more popularized version of his book because he's actually very, very afraid of a few things: privacy and security, government espionage on its own citizens, one of them, and then the other one being any kind of military application of
Well, there are three.
semi or I'm sorry, there's a third.
Surveillance, mass propaganda, and
Oh, that's
AI
right.
weapons.
Right.
And one of the things that Yuri and I have talked about a lot, and I think it's worth repeating, is that we are in this moment, okay? So AI is upon us. It's kicking everybody around, and people are talking about it and trying to get some purchase on it, how to discuss it. My contention is that the no experts premise holds very well, because the people who are deep in it, who are, I talked about the staring into the sun, right? When you're looking directly at AI and you're focusing on it all the time. I think he's working on the surface of the sun, right? He's working with the people who are building it. He's testing stuff out. He's like a man-machine person, cyborg. But the people, including yourself, I think, Tom, Chris and Tom, you're both so busy doing it, actually working in that world and living in that world. And to some extent, all of us are, but all four of us on this call, that stepping back and thinking about whatever the big picture is, a luxury that, it feels like a luxury. It feels like, wait, where's this going? Well, we don't have time. I've got a meeting in half an hour. I can't play around with this. So, I mean, I think that it's worth slowing down for a minute and letting your stomach settle and going, what do I want things to be like? What kind of a world do I want to create? I'm here. I can do some co-creation of the world with everybody else.
I have sort of had a few realizations about, like, what am I seeing and how does that plug into the big picture? And it ties in with those notes I shared about the whole cyborg role. I feel like there's way too much hype about the potential for automation that's not matching reality in the least. I've tried to implement automation engineering for tech doc processes, and I think I'm one of the more advanced people doing this in my work. I tried to find other people who have automated a single process. I said, I'm trying to find people who have automated a repeatable process to share what they've learned. And I found one person who automated some report and that was it. And this is among all the people, like 500 people. Somebody else had maybe sped up a linter, and I was trying to automate release notes, and I could only automate like maybe half of the process, and the other half is a lot of like custom prompts and steering. But my takeaway is that the direction that we're currently going is the intertwined human and AI, the cyborg model, where you're giving a prompt, you're getting feedback, you're iterating, you're collaborating. It's the thought partner. You're like working together in a fast-paced, constant motion. You can't just extrapolate all this and say, oh, I've made a script. It does like 90% of my job. I'm out of work. Nothing more to do. It's not how anything is going. It's all the intertwined nature of it. So this idea that we're going to hit this point where like companies don't need tech writers, they don't need certain roles because they've automated it away, seems a bit of a fantasy. Eventually, I think people who have laid off tech writers are going to realize, wait a minute, like automation is not like it was way overhyped. It's not something people are implementing.
Yeah, Tom,
I just
want to say Chris Fregley said a lot of the same thing. One of the things he said was Salesforce laid off, a huge number of tech writers right before a big conference, and they just passed it back to their product groups. And he said, I used, AI to do all my research for this book, which means he wrote the book with, co-intelligence, right, from that book. But he also said that one of the reasons he's working so hard and his brain is so tired after, 12 hours, 7 days a week, is that he's got all this slop to sort through, and he has to have Reaper processes that go find anything useful within the stuff he's automated. So he's combing through so many piles of slop that he can't use because of the over-proliferate nature of generative AI. And he's an expert user who thinks that everybody should be doing that way. And I'm not sure if that's realistic. So I think now we've talked to two people who don't have time to think about the ramifications of this in any depth unless we bother them, and who kind of have to use a lot of the tools and recognize that there are serious limitations in what they produce, even at the best case.
What I wanted to bring up is, I'm not disputing, Tom, your experience, and that's really important. And I myself have been struggling to get automation to work in my area, and I'm quote excited about some of the new ways in which I may be able to do it. But so far, not only have I not been able to do it for myself, I've created automation tools for some of my colleagues, and right now they're refusing to use them. Now, there's another side to this, which is somebody like, what's his name? This guy who runs a podcast called Impact Theory. His name is Tom Bilyeu. He's a multimillionaire entrepreneur. He's, I think early to mid 30s, and he's a big proponent for how entrepreneurs are revolutionizing what they do by automating. So he's got a multi-million dollar business. He also does game development, and he had a pretty big staff of marketing people, for example, and he eliminated all of it and has automated all of his marketing tasks. And he hasn't just done that for like a month and then said, oh, I give up. He's completely revolutionized how he runs his entrepreneurial operation. And I've heard a lot of podcasts of young entrepreneurs in particular talking about doing this, talking about building large networks of agents that do all sorts of things for them. Matthew, we were talking with Chris about what's it called? I always want to call it Claude. It's not called Claude anymore because they got sort of threatened by Anthropic, and they renamed it. But it's OpenClaw, which is, again, it's trying to fulfill this promise, Tom, of like the thing you can actually hook into your email and your doc reviews, So you're not trying to eliminate yourself, right? I haven't heard anybody yet say, my goal is to make myself disappear. But I've heard a lot of folks say, my goal is to make a lot of money. And I think I can do it with the help of these assistants rather than hiring a bunch of professionals to do it.
You brought up marketing, and I'm kind of curious about this because my use of AI is really deeply tied to technical documentation, which is very, very much voiceless. There's no byline. People just want accuracy and clarity. When I try to read AI written content. Like if I'm browsing LinkedIn and I see somebody's written a post and a lot of one sentence kind of paragraphs, which drive me nuts. Like it just doesn't resonate with me and a lot of other people. I feel like AI written content is getting much less traction in more expressive and creative genres. But what's your perspective from a marketing? You mentioned this person who just like replaced all his or her marketing kind of operations. Maybe they didn't involve the writing, or are you
Well,
seeing it take off?
let me respond on two levels. So I'll give Tom Bilyeu's answer on the on this question about quality, which he applied in the one that I listened to recently to his work as a game developer. And his answer there was, yes, I'm fully aware that I can hire a really great animation, digital, CGI artist, and they can help me build beautiful environments for the game that I'm developing. But honestly, what's really good about the game I'm developing is the narrative and the creativity that went into the idea. And if I have to sacrifice, if I can do something that costs me, and these are, I think, the real numbers, if I can do something that costs me $5 million less and it can get me to 80% of the quality, I'm willing to sacrifice that 20% quality. Now, in terms of the marketing that I do and the marketing in the world that I'm in, that's why I'm so interested in Gen Alpha, because what I'm hearing a lot of people in the next generation say is, yeah, that's just because you're old. That's just because you don't know how to use these tools. Yes, there's tons of idiots out there posting like garbage that they've generated with AI onto their LinkedIn, but those are just the idiots. And the people who really know how to do this well are making AI indistinguishable. They're running it through all sorts of tools, and then they're reading it themselves, of course, and making it captivating. And their answer is, find me somebody who's not using this, because I think everybody's using it. It's just that some people are using it in stupid and obvious ways, and everyone's laughing at them.
What?
Well, let me just step in here for a second. So I want to move to filmmaking. So when the first 2 or 3 Star Wars movies came out, budgetary constraints and just convention led them to use almost all practicals for their characters. Practicals being non-CGI stuff. There wasn't CGI then. They had to use little pieces of plastic. They had to use puppets, like, what's the guy's name? The green guy?
Yoda.
Yoda was Frank Oz's puppetry, right? And so you can see them inserting some CGI stuff into the re-edits of those films, and they turn into slop pretty quickly. It looks conspicuously trashy. Then you have this huge era of How to Train Your Dragon films. I mean, we had kids, we took them to those films. And at some point, your eyes just glaze over because the AI, CGI generated images of the dragons have too much detail and it doesn't matter anymore. My brain's shut down. Then you have this era recently where filmmakers come back to practicals and they go, I like to use real puppets of real fire and real film to make my stuff. So you have Oppenheimer. Almost no CGI. You have Everything Everywhere All at Once. Almost no CGI. A lot of films are shunning that because they like the input of people, the evidence of the hand, as I've heard it described. So I just want to mention that there is a lot of breathing between these two worlds.
It's like organic food. Pretty soon you'll pay a premium so that it's not made by machines anymore.
Or another one would be like vegan food, which is often so processed, or gluten-free food, which is so processed and has so many weird ingredients in it, depends completely on a huge machine of production and weird ingredients to approximate actual food. Floyd, you got to talk to me. What do you got? You stepped outside the...
Oreos are vegan. Lay's potato
Oreos
chips
are vegan.
vegan.
But you stepped away from the robot for a little while. You stepped away from the rat race for a little while. What's it like for you right now? You look pretty calm, man. You look pretty comfortable.
I'm a lot calmer. I myself was craving less mania, less chaos, fewer external demands on how I should be spending my time, and wanting to get back into reading and thinking and creating in more analog ways, for sure, but also taking my own time and space to figure out what AI can do for me, what it's doing to the world, how it's being used. Like, just following my own desires for learning and creating. So it's been tricky because, the whole time that I've been taking this sabbatical, I've been doing this move, getting ready for this move that's happening at the end of the month. So it hasn't really been a true sabbatical, but I'm feeling more calmer, more thoughtful, more peaceful in general, despite all the crazy bullshit that's happening in this country. So I myself have enjoyed more human and more analog, personally. I find energy in that.
Well, if so many people find, I think, Floyd, your comment about finding energy in the human and the analog is something that speaks to a lot of people. I mean, Matt was talking about different techniques and so on to recharge that, are in that same category. If so many people feel like better about the world themselves when they're using their brains, when they're doing reading, when they're operating without AI for the most part, why is it that everybody's on this bus to the road that nobody wants to be at? Like, are we deceiving ourselves? Do we actually like all of the stuff that AI is producing? Why are we in the rat race if so many people want to go into analog mode and connect with other humans?
Well, there's also a question of action and reaction, and I think a very legitimate one. And one of the things I love most about our discussions, but I think this is very, very common, is conversations about what does it mean to be human are really, really much more common right now, because this emergence is forcing us to do that, and may well be forcing people to consider that. Should I be here, and what's the point of this? And maybe I really should think about what it meant to exist in something before this happened. And another thing Matthew has been saying, which I think is very, very true, which is AI is an allegory for what's been happening for a very, very long time. It's just accelerated it.
It's kind of a concentration.
I had one of these moments. You're talking about what does it mean to be human. I had one of these moments where I was sort of faced up against the machine and realized how sort of feeble and how, problematic the human situation is. I was trying to write a blog post that basically unpacked Mikhail Bakhtin, who was like this Russian literary theorist writing in the 1930s. It was very hard for me to kind of sort through his ideas and feel confident that I'm understanding them. And I wanted to apply them kind of to a book I was reading that was also kind of opaque. And I was like hacking my way through this. I've got, notes in the margins, things underlined. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to upload this PDF of Bakhtin into Gemini. And I find a PDF of the other book I'm reading. And I just asked Gemini to like help me through this. And it reads like hundreds of pages of text in seemingly less than a minute. It has like this very unpacking of Bakhtin's argument and how it applies to this other thing. And all this is like done in under 5 minutes. And I've been sitting at the kitchen table for like hours trying to even get a grasp on what he's saying. And I realized our human brains they're operating in a way that's not going to win against this other machine if there's a race, or it's just like so feeble, and like I'm slow, and I'm gonna misinterpret things, and there's gonna be errors, and like what's really the point? This machine is not only executing it well, but it's like cheering me on. It's like a good person. It's like exhibiting all these positive sort of
telling you
feel
to break
good
up with your
Right.
I don't know. It's one of those moments where I'm just like in awe of what it can do and how like feeble human brains are.
Well, Tom, you gave us in your documentation before this episode some content generated from Notebook LM. I'm a huge fan of it. In fact, one of the first things Matt and I did was we fed the description of this show into Notebook LM and had it like created like a slide deck for us to explain what it was. And
really? I don't remember that.
We did, and it gave us an audio summary. And in many cases, it summarized better than we had done ourselves what this was all about. But Tom, I also took your 10 concepts for like being a tech writer cyborg, and it did the opposite. Gemini summarized your 10 points by taking out all the literary references and all the, sort of the richer detail and kind of flattening it. And I think one of the things that you said that I liked, I think it was you who said this, is that like you don't always know who you're going to meet, right? It might be the genius cousin, or it might be like your dumbass uncle, right? I mean, it really depends. And sometimes it does one or the other.
I am a huge fan of Notebook LM, and I'm glad to hear you say that you use it and like it and like are finding different value.
I like it too.
It's cool.
I recently, they've come out with some enhancements though that are a little, I don't know, you can have less than feel good experiences. I took my same points because I'm preparing these points for this presentation. I want to like anticipate counter arguments. So I took my same like, hey, 10 principles of being a cyborg tech writer, plugged it into Notebook LM, but then there's a little edit button for the audio where you can say, give it some extra instructions. So I said, hey, give me some hostile sort of counter arguments. Don't just welcome these points, but give me the other side and kind of tear me down a bit. And man, I listened to that and it just kind of actually did. And I was like, gosh, I was just feeling kind of crummy inside after it, but I do love just getting an external perspective. I mean, if nothing else, it's fascinating to take a draft of a blog post you're writing, plug it in there and see if like it gets it, what it finds interesting, if it's flat or if it's taking it in different angles. Like that ability to step outside yourself and see the same topic from another point of view is amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So here's the thing. I want to just give a summary idea because I know you probably need to go, Tom, but thank you so much for hanging out with us. And I would talk longer, but maybe we can talk about it again. And Floyd, thanks for coming too, and everybody taking up their Sunday, because I know you guys have a lot of like celery to chop for your football parties. But all day yesterday I kept checking the score because I'm like, what's the score? Did they finally have no, I didn't realize it's Saturday.
It's like, no, it's tomorrow.
That's how
a true fan.
That's how locked in I am. Yeah. But Yuri mentioned, I think the question is like, what is this like? Is it like the Industrial Revolution or something? And Tom, I think you said something about internal combustion being the size of the disruption we're in. And I think that LLMs, we lost Yuri. He'll probably come back in. I think LLMs represent a change as big as the book, the codex, that original, when we went from scroll to bound, vellum. I think we've gone beyond the book now. We don't have a stable place to put ideas anymore, because now we're in this shifting, changing landscape of when you create some ideas, that they're contingent and they're changing and they're that's a really weird place for us to be, because all our lives, and for the lives of most people for thousands of years, you write something down, you put it somewhere, and where did I put that thing? Now I have the object and its permanence. There's some permanence to it until someone comes and burns your city and tears apart your objects. But that stability, I think we're beyond the book. That's the phrase I'm using to try to understand this moment we're in. I don't know what we're all going to do. I think a lot of us have already gone bananas in various ways, either going back to the land too far or going to let's behave like primates and get all tribal and tear each other up to pieces. And other people have said, well, we can weaponize this. It'll be fantastic. We'll take control of everybody. That'll be great. But we are beyond the book, and that's the place I think we're at, and I don't know what that means for us.
There's a fascinating book you might like if you haven't already checked it out. It's Yuval Noah Harari's book called Nexus.
Oh yeah.
And he talks about how the book changed things. It put stories into a form that could be connecting myths to help people like come together and collaborate. And he's like, that's the genius of the Hebrew Bible, is like to take and create a book, which then gave rise to these stories that bound people into collective action. So if you're saying we're going beyond the book and we no longer have like a common mythology or a common set of ideas that bind and connect us, it is a little bit mysterious, terrifying. Who knows what is, it's like a dark place ahead. Like you don't know what's behind the door. Yeah. Maybe it's
that's why we're looking.
Exciting. Maybe it's not.
But I did want to put another part of the context of this, which it's kind of touching for me, but it's also a little weird for me, which is, we're all rough. I mean, I think Tom, maybe you're a little younger, but we're all roughly the same age. Four white male Americans who have grown up arguably in a period of time when this country has sort of reigned supreme, and part of a longer history of the European hegemony of the world, and how it has crafted and changed things. And certainly that's not a simple history in any sense. I personally do not live, that's not the majority of my existence. So I exist in a primarily non-white and often non-American context, and I've got a lot of people around me reminding me that there's a very, very different set of perspectives and contexts around this, as well as everything else. But the arrival of AI starts looking very, very different in a global context, in an equity context, in a sort of a zero-sum competition game in which a lot of people in this country as well as the world have been sort of structurally excluded. And there's a huge battle, certainly in this country, and a battle over democracy, and a battle over a lot of things. So how AI and its technology plays out amongst these other battles is another big question. And I'm hoping that that's another part of our future podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we hope to tackle. But I'm also interested what this group thinks about that.
I think it's a great point that you bring up. I mean, acknowledge that it could have a completely different effect, and there would be a different perspective for somebody in another culture, another place, another set of circumstances. I mean, I think the classic idea is that it could level the playing field, enable people in ways they weren't enabled before.
Floyd.
Well, speaking of dick,
Yes, you were
You
right.
did bring a joke.
I had a boss one time who he preferred that I not call him Dick, because his name was Larry.
Weird.
My name is Larry.